dot-com phenomenon in the mid-2000s. If you saw a flashing banner, get a free iPad, that was probably us spamming your browser. That grew into flat screens and TVs, and eventually that market changed because it got oversaturated with fake giveaways. We ended up doing about $24 million of Apple products sent throughout the country. Tons of Xboxes and PlayStations. We had swag. We even started, our original website was freecondoms.com. So we sent out a lot of condoms through the mail. And yeah, that was a really crazy experience, because what I learned from just being a college kid to building basically a massive ad network is what drives users online. We had tens of thousands of daily sets of eyeballs, and we all wanted them to go down into our funnel and do one thing, which is register. And we experimented for 7 straight years on what drives that traffic and learned a ton of lessons about optimization, about design. We had some surprising lessons along the way about what ads work and what doesn't. After that play, I ended up starting a games company that was VC backed, that was exploring what motivated human behavior at the confluence of casual gaming and online shopping. At this time, in about 2012, there are all these disruptive models like Swoopo and Guilt and Rue La La and kind of group buying models that were really changing the way people were going to, brick and mortar retail stores, but also the kind of big box traditional Amazons and Walmarts. And we learned a ton from that process. Not necessarily how to build a new startup in that realm, but more how to do really good games. So we ended up selling, instead of what I thought was going to be like a sale to Amazon for millions, we sold to GSN, the game show network, for not pennies. And we ended up rolling our team into them and building their Facebook casual game sector, which was mostly virtual casino, lightweight bingo games, things like solitaire and card games, and they were selling digital tokens. So we learned a ton about what motivates users to buy token packs and how to get them to have self-expression and play with their friends and building up their K and virality, and a ton of lessons in that department. Meanwhile, I'm constantly learning about what drives human behavior on the physical realm. I started studying neuroscience. I started studying psychology. I just became interested in every single driver of essentially, why does anybody do anything? That was the kind of driving force when I walked into a room. I'm like, why are you wearing that? What are you doing? Why are people talking about this? What the hell is TikTok? It just drove every single thing I wanted to do. And I'm going to close my door because it's trash day. I'm in Venice Beach, and I keep my little bungalow door open all day here, and so sometimes you got to close it because of noise. And, at the end of the day, I think website designers and user experience experts are storytellers. And I was always trying to tell stories for consumers. It was always hard because you could never really touch a customer. You could never really hold their hand and walk them through the experience. And a lot of times you're looking at massive macro data, and it's hard to kind of grok, what does this mean? How are people feeling when they see that button? What's their rating of this experience like? Why are they going to tell their friends to do anything? So eventually I rolled that into wanting to do storytelling and kind of burned out on tech. And so now I'm in LA pitching TV shows all around human experiences. And most of these are non-scripted kind of reality things about people going through changes, grappling with life. I went through all these personal changes, and I want to tell those kind of stories. And so I'm doing the obligatory write a screenplay, fail to sell a screenplay, and then go back to consulting like most people do out here. So that's my very brief snapshot. I'm super interested in the motivators of the human brain, like why somebody clicks button A more than they're going to click button B, and why they're going to come back to your website and go through your funnel and feel good about your brand and tell their friends about how good it is, and why they're going to come back to it again and again and again, as opposed to your competitors. And I think it's a really tough problem. I think UI designers are the heroes, the unsung heroes of every company, because they're the ones building the yellow brick road into the piggy bank. They are the ones that march customers who are frankly bonkers. Let's agree that most users and customers act irrationally. They're not super smart, as intuitive as we all think they might be. And so we're grappling with it's so simple, it's so beautiful. Why aren't they clicking it like I want them to? These are really hard problems to solve because humans aren't perfect. We're not robots. And we're in 2020, especially in a post-pandemic world, we are constantly distracted by everything. Our attention span has gone down. Our time on site has plummeted from what it used to be a decade ago, where people had 30 seconds to browse around and make a decision and click. Now it's down to like 7 or 8 seconds to see if they even want to join or click the next button. So it's critical we build paths and designs that are just simple. Users are used to screens and interfaces on mobile and desktop. So it's always amazing to me how bad websites can look, and how the beautiful ones aren't always the ones that work best. It's the simple ones. And so simple is always not easy. So that's kind of my thesis. That's the way I think about things. You know, I've been out of the game for a couple years in terms of like digital ads, but I still talk to lots of companies that have daily challenges on how to drive their traffic and where to send them and how to get them back. And yeah, that's kind of my whirlwind tour. So
cool. Thanks so much for that, Peter. I think you know, one of the things that you sort of touched on is you know, user experience and the importance of it. I think, you know, one of the things that a lot of folks are dealing with now with coronavirus is their budgets being cut, and, you know, focusing on their most important, you know, areas, and that's probably not user experience to many. But, you know, from your point of view, why do you think it's still important for companies to continue to invest in that, even during times when their budgets are being decreased? You know, how does that differentiate them from the competition, and why will that bring an ROI versus, you know, say something else that you know, they're potentially looking to spend on?
yeah, it's a really great question. So for the people that just got on, I'm seeing tons of budget cuts in tech and app design in terms of current projects. Everybody's constantly refining features and product testing and rolling out new versions. And a lot of times the first thing to be cut is UX design. And I get it. People are pausing a lot of projects, but at the end of the day, I think the biggest mistake companies are doing is having developers do the design and not really considering the expertise and the best practices that are out there. We all know kind of what works and what doesn't and why, and skipping that critical step of optimizing flows. Or a lot of times CEOs that have a little bit of a flair for design and they have a big ego and they have strong opinions say, I want it to look like this. This is what was in my dream. This is the shower idea. And these are the clunkiest, weirdest ideas that probably work for a well-educated Harvard grad with plenty of cash in the bank, but an average, you know, middle to lower class Flyovia citizen is not as savvy, that doesn't act the same way, that doesn't have the same attention span. So I think it's critical, if you can't hire an in-house expert, to at least do a pass with an outside consultant on best practices. Like sometimes a cursory 2-hour review can get you that low-hanging fruit and bring that optimization of the CTR up 20% just on some minor changes, usually reducing word count and redoing the button placement. I think it's really an often overlooked thing companies are missing out on, just like basic things you can do. And this goes for everything from retail design and POS, like cash register experiences, to physical product design and like how things are molded and sculpted for the hand. And there's tons of ways to just take a look and spend time with users and do some like focus group stuff that's really lightweight, that doesn't cost a ton, like paying some huge, you know, branding company or strategic consulting firm to go and do a review for 3 months. Like you can often get a lot done in 2 or 3 hours.
And, you know, changing gears a bit, one of the things that, you know, you touched on a bit was gamification. For those who aren't familiar, can you sort of talk about like what gamification is? You know, I think what many people don't realize, and me also coming from a games background, that gamification is being used in everyday life, and you know, people don't even know it. So maybe talk about some of the real world examples that people are familiar with, but also, you know, how can folks incorporate gamification into the websites they're building, their apps they're building, and you know, the companies they're building.
Yeah, sure. So I know I'm talking to some seasoned pros. A few people are on video, but who's not only heard of gamification, but feels well versed in this subject? Raise a hands. Anybody on video?
There's like a way to wave hands, by the way, on the Zoom chat. I don't know.
Oh, really? I haven't seen that feature.
Yeah. Like
I saw some mediums. Okay, there's a thumbs up. Nice. Thanks, Lindsay. So, yeah, this is a great question. This topic is, like many, it's wrought with misinformation. There's a lot of theses and theories. It's been around since sort of buzzy around '09, '10, '11, and it's kind of come full circle. But essentially, gamification is taking game design principles and applying them to non-traditional, non-gaming environments. And so that might be as simple as adding points, badges, leaderboards, trophies to a company like a brick and mortar retail or a credit card company. So think about a classic airline miles and status upgrades to gold, platinum, silver, whatever. Those are all gamified ways that users can interact with your product. And so, a lot of companies like gyms and online services are now learning the power that people are very motivated to get a micro badge or to beat their friends, score on their electric bill, or to add 2 friends to their account and get 50 virtual points, which could give them a new skin to their background. And all these things are gamey ideas that, frankly, the game industry has been learning since 30 years ago, since the days of Pong in the '70s, on and on and on. Game companies have mastered these intrinsic motivators. Everybody knows the difference between extrinsic motivators, which is getting a paycheck or getting a raise or earning benefits, versus intrinsic. We're figuring out time and time again that these psychological motivators are what pushes people even more than like a financial benefit. And so those are things like self-expression, the feeling of cooperation, leveraging social peer pressure, group competition, seeing your score compared to others and actually wanting to achieve, and monitoring the like dopamine fix of this user journey to like complete things or tidy them up or solve a problem and be rewarded with something that's non-financial instead of just a coupon, be able to like put a new background color on your user account or upgrade your avatar's hairstyle. Those things are really, really powerful. So I've got hundreds and hundreds of examples. I think one of my favorites of all time is the speed cam lottery that a local city did. Instead of issuing tickets to people that sped in this area, so when you see the little flashing sign, it shows your speed, and you're like 45 miles an hour speed limit, and then you're going 47, and then they can issue tickets for people that are going over it. Instead, what they did was people that were behaving correctly and going the correct speed or lower were all entered into this lottery and given a chance to win all the money they collected from the tickets issued to the speeders. And so that's a positive intrinsic motivator. They were entered into a pool where, if you've looked at B.F. Skinner and looked at any Psych 101 experiment, that random chance and like luck, which is why everybody plays slot machines so much, is that like random chance to win that's spread out differently over time, is super exciting and it's really fun. And so they're going to slow down for that being a motivator and want to be rewarded for doing the right thing, as opposed to a way worse motivator, which if you're a manager, you know that fear is not a very good motivator. A lot of people rule with an iron fist. That gets people to behave, but definitely doesn't get their best behavior. So gamification is everything from the McDonald's monopoly, when you get tear off tickets and trade them in for free fries, to really complicated credit card point systems that nobody can figure out, and everything in between. So I'm seeing more and more of that. A lot of people think if you just stick a game on a page, that's gamification, but it can be really simple to making the button look bouncy. And that's called juicy feedback, as you guys probably know, in my upper right corner. And like the more juicy, the more simple, the more intuitive designs are, the more that somebody wants to grab and pull that virtual apple out of the sky and eat it, which is that kind of reward of clicking a button, the more likely you're going to pull people into the funnel, into those flows, and create rewards along the way.
So, I had another question, but before I do, when I start opening it up to Q&A, I think the best way would be just message, put in the group chat that you'd like to ask a question, and then I'll unmute it for you, or you can message me either in the group chat or message me, and I'll unmute it for the next pause to allow you to ask the question. But Peter, on that note, talking about gamification, what tools, what courses, resources out there are available so that, folks who don't know much about it, where can they learn? You know, what's the best way to learn? How can folks, you know, learn about that?
So if you're running like a small product or service and you want kind of the down and dirty basics, a simple YouTube search will give you about 15 TED Talks on the subject. A few are outdated and you're going to see the same names come up again and again. There are a few good books out there and best practices. Some of them are starting to be a little dated, but I think the best thing anybody can do is pay attention to what thought leaders are doing, what market leaders are doing with their website design. Like look at the top performing gaming apps like the Candy Crushes and the Kings and PopCaps of the world. How are they designing their interfaces? And steal those ideas because they are the masters of having users click buttons and making them look attractive and making their explanations and tutorials flow right into the next step and not making anything difficult. So, you know, I wish I had a website with a basket of resources to easily point to. So the good news is a cursory search, if you're not informed of what this is, there's a lot of basics out there. And then beyond that, you know, I think other than hiring a UX expert or gamification thought leader, you know, I don't know. I actually don't know that there's a ton of resources. And I'm actually laughing because David knows the Monopoly game was fixed. Somebody saw McMillions and that whole Monopoly thing, there's a bunch of intrigue. I love game scandals too. If you look at like Press Your Luck, the no whammies, stop. If you've ever seen that documentary, this guy rigged the whole thing. Every game can be tricked. You know, we did this at Free iPods. We got scammed and tricked all the time. Users are very innovative too. So be careful to like with your giveaways.
So Greg from the chat asks, what advice does Peter have for gamification for a corporate environment? I think that's a really good question too, because like, you know, being in startups, we're small, you know, early stage companies, it's so easy to iterate and they're always like, you know, execute quick, fail fast, right? And you know, being in a corporate environment, you know, getting change to happen, you know, is sometimes very slow. So, you know, you've worked in startups, you've worked in corporate environments. Yeah, it's a really good question. And we'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, definitely.
Actually, sorry, let me unpack that one. This a little bit more. It's actually making it available in corporate environments, sort of like Bonusly, if you know those guys, just to more attract corporate customer.
So are you guys B2B or consumer facing?
The question's unrelated to ZipRecruiter. It's just more of a curious question. But we're B2B.
Gotcha. Okay. So yeah, there are a lot of third-party overlays that you could tap into some currency or, you know, add their gimmick or flues dollars or points or whatever to the site. But I think one of the most underrated ways to use gamification is not necessarily with your product or service, is with your management techniques and managers using tricks to incentivize their employees to be more motivated, to have more like lock-in and loyalty to the company, have off-sites and games, the ways that they can partner together. There's all kinds of stories out there about everything from team-based weight loss incentives to like hackathons where you get an award at the end of the day where companies can band together and like making the work environment really feel exciting and bonded and like a safe place where you can experiment and try new things, and you get thanked with not just dollars but with praise and relationship, and all that can be done really creatively. Even little examples of playing like buzzword bingo during corporate meetings, and when like you get a point taken away if you use too many like shitty buzzwords. And I've just seen tons of great examples on ways people can reward their employees with gamey kind of ideas and timers and scorekeepers and little mini trophies without going too far, obviously. But on the corporate side, I think some very lightweight, like a lot of people just spam some virtual currency and like swag and call it a day, but I don't think that quite adds up to a really simple gamified experience. In fact, I think we probably need a new phrase from gamification to just funification, that adding some bounciness, some lightweight experience for customer flows, if they're logging in and getting some data, like it needs to feel good. And what they're using in their phone all day long are apps like Snapchat and TikTok and Waze, which feel good. And if they have to go to some corporate page to dig up an Excel file, it just feels bad. They're going to just be pumping out less serotonin and dopamine in their system and kind of having a worse experience. And so every company is different, so it's hard to answer kind of a vanilla answer, but I think the more you get to know what the customer's feelings are as they use the product service flow, for consumer-facing products, the best thing I say is to do user testing, to get in front of the users and watch them do it. Don't have them self-report. One of the worst things you can do is just have some survey at the end of it, like, how would you rate this? Because people don't understand their own emotions in relationships. They definitely don't understand their emotions like giving a survey to a company, which nobody's psyched to do to it anyway. So you actually have to like set up a way to watch them over the shoulder or track their mouse or even heat map their eyeballs, which you can do easily now. And have your designers, meaning your coders and your engineers and your like product heads, as well as the UI guys who are on the staff designing it, watch every user use it and get into the heads of your users, constantly acting like them. When I was at GSN, I never played a virtual slot game in my life. Like my crazy aunt in North Carolina does. She hits that button for no tokens and puts money into it. And so I had to like become a user. I gave myself like a Karen name and pretended I was from like Kansas and tried to get addicted to slots and really tried to feel what it was like and get in the head of the users. So the more we did user testing, the more we found out what was essentially broken and what could have been optimized, and to have that channel of communication really easy for them to give feedback of what like was frustrating and what wasn't.
Thank you.
Oh, Greg, yeah, continue. Feel free.
No, thank you. That's a great answer.
Yeah, I think on that note too, you know, one of the things that we're seeing in games and as I've thought about them is, you know, people are designing for monetization opposed to like good engagement. And you've seen it as, you know, I'm just thinking about the game industry as a whole. It's moving from, you know, you could go on the iPhone App Store and pay $20 for a game and everything's free to play. And even games like, you know, sports games like FIFA 20, NBA 2K, games that never were free to play, you know, they're making them free to play and they're converting them to ultimate teams. Do you think there's been an over investment in gamification and that now people are, you know, being with user experiences are being so focused on monetization that it's going to end up affecting engagement and creating sort of this poor funnel that, you know, will have people coming away with bad experiences? You know, how do you balance those two things between, yeah, you want good monetization, but you want engagement and you want people to come away with like, oh, I actually enjoyed this. I don't feel like they're just trying to pressure me into spending more money.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing when you're doing product experimentation, I'm assuming everybody's adopted some lean startup models and they're testing all kinds of MVPs and adding features, taking them away, is figure out what your success metrics are. A lot of people just want the company to do well and they don't quite know what the ideal user experience is like. And so there's always a conflict between, well, we can get users in the door, but we have to do it so brute forcefully, like, you know, the pushers on a Tokyo subway, like getting shoved in there tightly packed, but they have a terrible experience and they're never going to come back again. And on the flip side is you can create a really lightweight and kind of simple design that doesn't push them through the process with any incentives. And once they're in, they get locked in, but their conversion rates are super low because there's not anything sexy or thrilling or exciting or any incentive set up to hook them into the experience. So you got to know what your success metrics are. One of the ways we did this is everybody's heard of a post-mortem with projects. We used to do a pre-mortem where we would talk about why this failed before we even built out the prototype. And we would guess what would have failed, what went wrong, why is this likely to not reach our success metrics target. So yeah, it's always tricky, but you have to know what you want to do and go in with goals and be agnostic to what the outcome is. Most people go in with, I really want this to work. I really think A should work and not B. But if you're doing like cohort testing, you should just be agnostic, check your ego at the door. And a lot of times you're going to have to balance the, you know, brand strategist as well. If it doesn't live up to your mission statement of the company, you can't have, you know, some sexy girl pointing at the click here button if you're selling, you know, My Pillow.
There's a funny choice of funny company choice at the end. You know, I guess well, before I ask, you know, any other questions, Peter, one of the things I want to ask you, was there anything you specifically wanted to talk about that you think is important for the audience to know about, whether it's user experience, gamification, or even like, you know, sort of going about building companies and getting your employees to invest in these things? Anything you wanted to touch on that I haven't touched on, or the chat hasn't touched on so far?
No, I mean, I'd love to learn from you guys. What are the challenges out there? What keeps you up at night in terms of the UI? What experiments have you guys done that have been really surprisingly great? Anything that you thought was going to be perfect and it failed miserably? There's so many weird examples of how this world of designing experiences is pretty confusing and non-intuitive, because humans are this garbled mess of wants and desires and fears and irrational things going on in our brain. Plus, we get a text notification every 2 or 3 minutes now that takes priority over any sign-up form you're going to be doing online. So for me, like, the reason UI experts are heroes is because it is an obstacle course. It's an actually, you ever seen Ninja Warrior? Like, it is an actual obstacle course to go from click on site to revenue. And there are so many hurdles and crazy things they've got to jump and things to avoid. And if they fall into the pit of water, they leave your site and they're gone forever. Like, it's a huge deal. You're eliminated. And so what UI experts do is they bring it all together. So reducing a click, you should be like hero. You should be celebrated if you can get them to not. It is an incredible amount of effort with, you know, 2 grams of force and click it. Like, it is really hard work. And so tapping on a screen to hit next, cut that out. If it can take 1 tap instead of 3, do it. And yeah, people, I think if you treat them, this is not a very nice thing to say, but if you look at like sheep herders and the way that they push their flock into corrals, into pens, what do? Well, 1, there's sometimes a dog out there kind of saying, don't go away. And then 2, they often incentivize which gate is open and how they're going to corral. And people do act in flocking mechanisms. They act as a group. They want to see where the action is. They want to know, why should I do this? This is where all the heat is. The classic nightclub with the velvet rope. The illusion of exclusivity is a really powerful motivator. And so if you think big picture of like, how do I want it to feel to go through this flow? You want it to be easy. I think that's the kind of philosophy good designers adopt, is like, do anything and everything to make users get to the finish line happy and fast.
And I wanted to add to that before I get to you know, Alexander's question. One of the things that you talked about was like notifications and people, you know, every 2-3 minutes. I feel like, you know, now we have like this, everyone has ADHD of, you know, we're in something and then, oh, we get a text, we get this, we get all these notifications. And I think that goes back to like the question I was asking about monetization versus engagement, of like, you know, meaningful engagement. And it's like, if you're trying to do work and like you're getting these alerts, like, do you really need these alerts? Are they important? And it's definitely something that, you know, I think from your background and the way you've talked about it, you have to experiment and you have to really dig into the emotion of like, is this a good engagement? Does this lead to positive, you know, success for our company? Or is it just like a vanity metric and it looks good, but it really isn't good? And yeah, I don't think people talk about that, you know, word enough, vanity metrics. They, you know, that brand strategist wants this to accomplish or something else accomplished, and it leads to something.
Like we had the highest time on site metrics in our analytics the other day. I'm like, well, how many people are actually buying the thing? They're like, well, nobody's buying it. The time on site, they're really addicted to our website. I'm like, well, you're not selling minutes, man. You're selling products. So yeah.
But yeah, Alexander asked, at what point would be appropriate to add gamified features in an early stage startup?
So, you know, like any good company, you're probably filled with feature ideas. And the people that overuse them and add them and add them and test them and put things in because you can, it's called featureitis. I've had it. I've had bad cases of it where everything in my brain, stick it in there, put it in, add audio, put some music to this website, add anything. So it's really important to test and iterate cautiously and to test with a data-driven approach that you want to make sure, like everything's interconnected, just like the global pandemic and viruses and humans and culture and economies, everything's so connected. A lot of times if you push one thing that has high action here, it's going to break an action lower down the funnel. So I think in classic MVP design, build the core thing first, get people going from A to B to C and getting the product or service or wherever you want to point them, and then learn your baseline metrics. Then that's the goal, beat those metrics. So if you add one feature and it's just a funnel to like sign up for an online course, and now we give you, if you bring in a friend, we're going to lower the price for both of you by 20%. Well, that's a test. You're going to let it run. You're going to cohort it, hopefully, and run an A/B test so it's apples to apples. And if it passes the previous baseline, then incorporate it. Roll out that feature. And constantly testing new things. Be really creative. And ideally, you have enough statistical significance in your volume to test. I know the quant jocks out there are nodding knowingly that you had 7 people yesterday and we have 9 people today, so that means it's a win. Well, no, it's not often the way it goes. But I think you test early and often. And if you can't test with volume, test with like studying users. Get your friends, hand an iPad on the street to people, have people say, give them a task and say, I want you to check out, there's a credit on the thing, check out with a product and watch them do it and see how long it takes and have them talk out loud about what they're seeing and thinking. It's the best way to do it. Hand it to your aunt, hand it to your son, hand it to somebody and get them to try it. And I really encourage people to get wacky and creative with their ideas. Like have their office manager throw out an idea, have something crazy that like gets their attention. A lot of times the best banners we ever designed made no friggin' sense. The best banner was an upside down house. You've probably seen this banner. It was used for years and years and years. It was just weird and glitchy and it didn't line up right. And it was just upside down house. It had nothing to do with anything, but it did so well because it brought the eye from the content of the middle of the page up to this weird banner. And they're like, what's that? And I click it. So I say test early and often, try new things, be really creative.
And on that note, one of the things you touched on was like giving people iPads and stuff and testing. What are good incentives to test for testing? Like, do you think monetary, I'm going to give, like I always see, oh, you can win $25 Visa gift card if you fill out this survey, right?
Yeah, look, David put in the thing, usertesting.com is the best. And these are people that are paid. Hire some of the best user testers. They're getting like $5, $8, $12 per test. It's so worth it. And they're like really good at talking out loud and being dummies and saying, well, I'm really confused. And they kind of outrage. And like, you just learn a ton. Honestly, handing your iPad to a friend, I've seen it time and time again with these little startup ideas, and I've got an app or whatever. Most friends want you to feel good about yourself and blow a lot of smoke up your bum. And so be really careful to not just get generic vanilla feedback, because almost everybody will tell you you're doing great, and I love it. Get the user testing is filled with cynical Midwest housewives who are happy to tell you your website's a pile of shit. So hire them. They'll tell you your baby's ugly. You need to be ready to know your baby's ugly.
Any other questions from the chat? I know we only have a few more minutes, but I have a couple more on my list, but I want to see if anyone else had anything to ask. Go ahead, Zach. Oh, Keith, do you have a question? Yeah, I'll unmute it.
There.
Oh,
so yeah, thanks, Peter, for all these stories. So can you relate a little bit about instead of using games and what we know about human behavior to get people to buy stuff, changing their behavior in other ways, maybe like to encourage them to wash their hands? So do you have some experience or just tell some stories about that?
Yeah, like incentivizing behavior, especially with gamification, can't feel like work. It can't feel like an assignment. Most people are kind of adverse to authority figures. So I've seen a lot of this stuff with hand washing. Jimmy Fallon's making up songs. You know, happy birthday twice is too boring. Let's come up with a silly song. Let's teach our kids to do the like wring your hands like an evil person, turkey squish, turkey squish. So one of the best examples was this recycling bin. They had this township wanted more people to recycle. And so they had at the town center, they had this huge thing with lights around it like a big jukebox. And when you drop in an aluminum can, it goes boop, 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 and like you get 20 points. And when you drop another one, so people were going all over the parks and towns scouring for bottles and cans and putting it in there just to see if they could beat the previous person's score. It's kind of this great experiment in the happiness factor of why people love good interfaces. It feels good. It's satisfying when things work the way they want. And so here we are. We got to incentivize our employees, our kids, people to start acting very differently in the world, right? There's this huge change. I think I would equate the like virus scare with basically what smartphones have done to user behavior in the past 7-8 years in terms of massive sea change in user behavior. People are used to tapping very well, and it just cannot be too small of a button to tap. It cannot be too awkwardly placed. And it has to feel really fun. And so, you know, not having the button go away on tap during a long processing thing and people are tapping it twice is just such a no-brainer to do, but a lot of companies just never got there. So yeah, I don't know. I bet you've got a good example of something pandemic-wise and what people are doing to teach you.
Yeah, I mean, just like your recycling example is good because that one, you know, recycling seems even more boring than washing your hands right nowadays. So, right. But if you want people to actually change their behavior, you can't just make more signs that say recycling and all the other stuff. You'll get a certain number of people that do it for the greater good, perhaps, but you'll never get more than 20% or whatever, right? So if you really want 80% people recycling, you're going to have to make it fun, right? You're going to have to make it into a game, right?
You know, when you go into a great Japanese sushi restaurant and everybody kind of goes, they say hello in Japanese and everybody kind of murmurs it from the other room. It's just a nice kind of personal experience. But like, if you have one of those "that was easy" buttons next to your sink at the house thing, and every time you slap it, everybody chimes like, "Hey!" Like, you get a round of applause and like just funny and stuff like that is what a good manager is always thinking about. And you've got to take it down after it gets pretty annoying. But it's just it revocalizes the priorities, the mission statement of your company, and that you want people to do that, and it's all chimed in. I think if you're going to reward people, this is the biggest tip. Do it in front of others. Don't do it privately, because a public reward is 10 times more powerful than just like a behind the scenes attaboy. Yeah.
Good, thanks.
Chino has a question, so I'm going to unmute him. Chino, can you got it? Yeah, I think I need to unmute him. Hey. Oh. Hey. Does it work or? Try to unmute one more time, otherwise. I think. Be able to do it, or I don't know why he's. Try. So weird. I think.
You know, type it in the chat bar.
Yeah, type it in, I guess. I don't know why there's an issue. Let's see. Oh, there you go. Here, you can talk now.
Yeah, we were crossing wires. There's a way to unmute yourself by just hitting the space bar, and it temporarily unmutes you.
Oh, got it. All good. I thought I had to unmute you because I had a setting on. All good. We're good now.
Yeah, and so I've got an e-commerce company, but what's different is we're using augmented reality as a controller for the manufacturing process. So customers can choose a piece of furniture. They can use their phone to scale it in AR in their home and place the order in the dimensions of this furniture. And so it's kind of how do I convey this interactivity on the homepage? Because it's really hard to convey without showing a video or showing the app in person. Because the challenge is this thing has never existed before. where
And you want it, this is the homepage to download the app or to
no, it's an
or
e-commerce site.
on the phone?
It's actually an e-commerce site, and so I want to be able to convey on the homepage of the e-commerce site that you're really empowered to change the product via your phone prior to ordering and receive that custom product.
Yeah. Okay. So I think for you, the big lesson is show the consumer what the win is and get them that win as fast as humanly possible. And so for me, as a guy who has actually used AR to measure a table and see if it would fit in my room, and it did perfectly, I had this light bulb moment. It was like 2 weeks ago that this is going to change everything. This is huge. I had no idea. And I'm a pretty tech nerd guy. That light bulb moment is the thing you're selling. And so you do not need an embedded YouTube video with a giant play button. That is work. So build an animated 3-frame, bump, bump, bump. That light bulb moment can be in CSS with 3 JPEGs. That's autoplay. That shows it. And don't do the scrolling thing with dots. That's so outdated. Show it in a beautiful way. Like, what would Apple do if they wanted to show the insides of their computer, or somebody using AR to measure a paper towel holder if it fits under your cabinets? They would show it on scroll or on hover or something that shows that moment of a woman holding their phone, smiling. We zoom in on their phone, they stretch it out, the measurement comes on, and just like a game, just like when Mario jumps up on a brick and explodes it and he gets the mushroom, like something fun and exciting, when she's like happy, capture that and show the customer exactly what that moment feels like. And there, you've done it in under 3.5 seconds. You don't need a 1.5 minute. Hi, I'm Tammy. I'm going to show you how so-and-so works. I'm already lost. I'm going to close that window. So show it with 3 frames and get it over with. And like, that's the thing. And then a big simple button that says learn more, download now, whatever you want them to do. Remove all the clutter. Most people that are herding sheep don't have 80 other pins open that sheep can kind of wander into. They have one pin where they need them to go, and make it clean, white, beautiful. And what's your call to action? You want to download, or you want to like get their email address? What's the or you want to raise money maybe?
yeah, essentially. But yeah, I mean, there's got to be this journey. Right now, I'm just trying to capture awareness.
Yeah. So that to me, like if my mom knew she could do that and she's not very savvy, you need to show somebody holding it, measuring it, and being happy. And like, that's the story. That's soup to nuts.
Thanks.
I was on mute.
4 words max on that page too. Like don't write a paragraph.
So I think we have time for only like 1 or 2 more questions. So I have a question, but want to see if anyone else had any more questions for the audience ask questions and me asking questions. Anyone? Give it a sec.
And even if it's not a question, give them some expertise. Anybody that's done something you're proud of or want to share a cool example of something they tested that did well, I'd love to hear it.
A lot of people are afraid to talk public. So I guess maybe I'll end it on a question, and then maybe someone will come up with something. But I think one of the things we are also talking about was positive versus negative reinforcements. I always remember you telling me about the people who would speed. I forgot where it was, and they gamified speeding tickets. So that,
yeah, we talked about that right at the beginning of this call, the speed cam lottery.
Yes, yeah. I don't think, yeah. Oh, I don't even forgot you even mentioned it. So like things like that, you know, I see people do a lot of negative reinforcement. You know, are there scenarios where negative reinforcement works? You know, are there times when you know those types of interactions actually have success, or is it important when people are thinking about those things to try to frame them in a more positive light? You know, even when I think about in video games, like when I die or something, you know, they even turn those into framing them into positives of like, you know, try here again, or like they make it a positive. They don't go like you died. So, you know, what are your thoughts on that?
So loss aversion is one of the psychological tricks of humans. We hate loss. In fact, we hate it 3 times more than the benefit of winning. games figured this out a decade ago when basically dying, remember you get Mario or Contra, you get 3 lives, you try to go through this huge long game, and if you die the 3rd time, back to the very beginning, start over, new game. And nobody likes that. Like, we don't want to lose built up progress, and so most games start you up with a recent save point, and now like big AAA war titles, just you die, you just start back again, and your health regenerates. We stopped using health meters. And so credit card companies, anybody with virtual currency has stopped expiring points. A lot of companies had bad experiences where, act now at Hilton Rewards or before the end of the year, and you're going to lose your points. And so they'd be desperately booking a random Hilton stay or upgrade with time limitations. People don't want to lose what they've accumulated, but it's important to get them to interact with your site and keep earning and things. And so you can also often like shift those points into some other good, or give them an incentive to act now and then reduce the benefit, with a sale or some other thing. But yeah, loss aversion, if you want to study it, it's fascinating. One of my reality shows, I'll tell you if anybody's interested, is very ballsy, but it's asking somebody to bet their entire life savings on one bet after, yard sailing every single thing they own except the shirt on their back, Brewster's Millions style, for those who are old enough to remember that movie. And instead of doubling it like a blackjack game, we're going to 10x that life savings. And I've asked tons and tons and tons of people, would you do that? Would you risk everything you've earned and socked away to do it? And a lot of people wouldn't, even though it's an amazing bet to 10x your life savings. And either way, it's this story of triumph or tragedy, and we think there's a real show behind it if we can get the legal team to pass it. So yeah, loss aversion is built deeply in our psyche. We want to avoid it at all costs. And so if you're going to design user experiences, give incremental constant rewards. Keep in mind that the earning of the reward is what's fun. It's not the getting of the reward. That's actually when all that dopamine drops. It's the like, I'm almost at level 3 gold. LinkedIn did that amazing thing with their progress bar. It's like almost complete. Just verify your email address, this last thing. And you're like, I kind of want that 100%. So don't take things away. Don't pull them back. Yeah, always forward, 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 forward.
Thanks for that, Peter. So I would say, unless anyone has any last questions, I want to thank everyone for joining. I'm going to distribute an email. I recorded the session, so for people to play it back. I'm going to start doing this series probably every Tuesday, and with a focus on communication and bringing in someone who's done it before. So next Tuesday, I'm going to have my friend Noah Starr come in and speak. He's a social media influencer with about 40,000 followers. Built a product called Truth Serum. So it's like History Channel for Instagram. And he's going to talk about, building a social media channel, growth strategies, how to create valuable content. And the week after, I'm going to have a business coach and psychotherapist on, talking about, how to tell your employees about how to deal with negative situations and how to communicate that, and also how to deal with the anxiety of coronavirus, because we're all reading Twitter and reading the news, and it's all so negative. But I think there's definitely this is also a good chance to sort of hone in on that anxiety and figure out how can I have a positive view of all this. So I am going to send that all to you guys if you're interested in signing up, and really appreciate it. So everyone have a good day. And to Lindsay's question, I will share Peter's email. I'll email it to everyone. Peter, if you want, you can put it in the chat too. If you want.
I'll put it in the chat. Anybody has any follow-up questions, got a lot of free time these days, feel free to ping me with questions. I'm Peter Martin at Gmail, and I'll put it in the chat. And yeah, it was good to talk to everybody. Exciting stuff.
Cool. I'll end it once he does that. Cool. Let's give it a sec.
Peter Martin at gmail.com. Yeah, don't hesitate to reach out. Good luck, everybody. Stay safe.
Have a good one, Peter.
All right. Thanks. All right. Bye.